The first thing he noticed was the weariness in her eyes. Not the kind that came from a bad day, but the kind built from years of carrying more weight than any one person should. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But the moment she whispered, "Can we share your fries, sir?" something inside him shifted, like a locked door easing open for the first time in a long time. The rain had just ended, leaving the pavement outside the tiny lakeside cafe shimmering under the muted glow of streetlights. The late afternoon breeze still clung to the room, carrying with it the lingering scent of wet leaves and damp earth. Maren stepped inside with her 5-year-old son, Theo, their clothes still slightly chilled from the walk. A thin umbrella dripped quietly at her side, and her fingers, faintly trembling, tightened around Theo's small hand. For a moment, she simply inhaled the air around her, roasted beans, warm pastries, the faint salt of fresh fries, and let herself slow down. They needed to sit. They needed warmth. But the cafe was full, the storm having herded every customer indoors. Only one seat remained, half of a tiny table already occupied by a man in a charcoal coat, his posture upright, quiet, composed. A plate of fries sat untouched at his elbow, steam rising in soft curls. Maren swallowed her hesitation, ordered the cheapest drinks she could afford, and eventually approached his table. He looked up only when she spoke. "Would you mind if we sat here?" His eyes, sharp but not unkind, studied her briefly. Then he gave a single nod. No words, just space. Theo climbed into the chair, his too thin coat damp, his boots squeaking softly against the floor. He gazed at the fries on the table with the kind of innocent longing only a hungry child could have. Maren noticed. She always noticed. She leaned down to whisper to him, but he shook his head shyly. Her cheeks warm with embarrassment, she lifted her gaze. "Can we share your fries, sir? I'll pay for them. I just didn't have enough for food today." The man stopped flipping through his folder. Stopped breathing, almost. Then he gently slid the plate toward the center of the table. "They're better when shared anyway." Her gratitude was quiet. Theo's was bright and wide. The moment lingered. Soft. Human. Behind the counter, baristas whispered. "That's him. The billionaire. Elian Drake." But Maren didn't hear, and even if she had, she wouldn't have reacted. She wasn't the type to care about wealth. Her world revolved around warmth, not wallets. And for the first time in days, something inside Elian softened. Not because he pitied them. But because sitting across from this tired mother and her bright-eyed boy, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, stillness. The kind that felt like peace. They shared the fries. They shared a table. They shared laughter sparked by Theo's stories. But no names. And yet, the moment etched itself into Elian's mind like ink staining cotton. He thought that would be the end of it. He was wrong. Days later, rain poured across the city in cold silver sheets. Elian sat in his car near a bus stop, talking absently with his assistant as he tried to find a moment of quiet. When he saw her again, soaked, shivering, shielding Theo with her own scarf while covering his head with a wrinkled grocery bag, he couldn't stop staring. She didn't look pitiful. She didn't look broken. She looked like a mother who would set herself on fire if it meant her child stayed warm. When she boarded the bus, he followed without thinking. He watched her from 4 rows back. Watched her comfort Theo. Watched her create shadow puppets on the ceiling despite trembling hands and faintly blue lips. He didn't speak to her. Didn't approach her. But he knew, truly knew, that there was something about this woman he was not meant to forget. The image of her, carrying Theo in the rain with nothing but a plastic bag and sheer will, stayed with him long after the bus drove away. It was that image that led him to the small, struggling community library days later, where he found her at a tiny table surrounded by children, sketching scenes of wonder with colored pencils smudged across her wrists. Her drawings weren't perfect. They were better. They were alive. They held stories she had lived, and stories she wished she had. When she admitted she used to dream of becoming an illustrator, before life demanded she grow out of her dreams, Elian felt the words hit deeper than she could ever know. He left the library that day with one of her sketches still lingering in his thoughts long after he set it back on the table. He didn't expect to see her again so soon. But one evening, after walking out of a failed business deal that should have upset him more than it did, he found himself slumped on a park bench, exhausted in ways he couldn't articulate. And Maren appeared like a quiet answer to a question he hadn't asked. She offered him half a cracked granola bar. "Emergency snack," she said. "Best I've got." She sat beside him. No judgment. No pressure. Just presence. And for the first time in his adult life, he felt something loosen in his chest. When she told him, even machines need maintenance, he nearly choked on a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding for years. She walked away. And he knew he wasn't the same. Then came the night she collapsed. He found her behind the bakery counter, pale, burning with fever, crumpling to the floor as if her strength had finally given out after years of being overused. He caught her before she hit the ground. He carried her through the cold streets, whispering reassurances she couldn't hear. In his private wellness suite, while nurses worked to bring her fever down, he sat nearby, unmoving, guilt sitting on his shoulders like stone. And then Theo arrived. The little boy rushed past everyone, climbed up beside his unconscious mother, and cared for her with a tenderness far too old for his age. Honey water. A damp towel. A blanket tucked beneath her chin. "When Mom sleeps, I protect her, 'cause she always protects me." Elian's eyes burned. Maren did not need charity. She needed rest. She needed space. She needed someone to simply stay. So he stayed. When she woke hours later, he told her softly, "You're not alone, Maren. You never were. You just needed someone to notice." Days later, a folder arrived on her doorstep, an official proposal for her to join the creative development team for a children's storytelling app. Not charity. A job. An opportunity. A doorway reopened to a dream she had buried under bills and exhaustion. She accepted. She earned her place brick by brick, sketch by sketch, idea by idea. And she bloomed there, slowly, unexpectedly, beautifully. Elian visited her workspace sometimes, bringing tea or offering design notes. Their fingers brushed more than once. Their eyes held longer than either admitted. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was labeled. But something lived between them. And it grew. Her new apartment was small, modest, bright, the kind of place where new chapters began quietly. Theo loved it instantly. When Ellen stopped by one evening with feedback papers and a small gift bag for the boy, Theo ran to his room and returned holding a worn drawing, the scribbled memory of that first day. 3 figures at a cafe table. A plate of oversized fries. Above the man's head, a speech bubble. "They're better when shared anyway." Elian looked at the drawing for a long moment, his throat tightening. He looked at Theo, who was waiting patiently for his reaction. He looked at Maren, who stood quietly behind her son, eyes soft, unreadable, hopeful. And in that moment, he knew something with absolute certainty. His life had changed the moment a tired mother asked if they could share his fries. A question small enough to ignore, but powerful enough to rewrite everything. Because sometimes fate doesn't arrive with fireworks or thunder. Sometimes it arrives gently. As a whisper. As a plate of fries pushed across a table. As a woman who carried light into the darkest corners of her life, and somehow lit his too. And as the evening settled around them, warm and golden, with Theo's laughter echoing in the apartment, Elian Drake realized something he had never understood before. Love doesn't always enter loudly. Sometimes it slips in quietly. Sits down. And stays. Your story is complete. Your rules were followed. If you want the next one, just say, "Ready for story."